Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's edition of the Deep Fried Draft Show. My name is Brian Bosarge. We got a very special guest coming on tonight. You have probably heard him on commentary on various ESPN3, ESPN Plus games. You've heard him during halftime if you've watched a SEC game on CBSSports.com. He is my good friend, Emory Hunt. He is the czar of the playbook and football game plan. Emory, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fine, Brian. It's great to see you, man. It's been a while.
Yeah, probably what, the 2020 Senior Bowl was the last time I saw you. I know you didn't make it this year. A lot of good buddies didn't make it down there this year. I missed everybody. It was kind of lonely, to be honest, there all week. I only knew really a handful of people.
Yeah, how was the press box? I know it was at the new stadium. Was it tight like Lad Peebles or a little bit more room?
Well, I was actually I was doing the radio call for the iHeart during the game, so I was off into a radio booth. So, and they had spacers. They only allowed maybe 20 press in the normal press box, but I know the seats there, it's like maybe half of what they had at Lad.
Oh wow! Congratulations, man! I didn't know you did the radio broadcast. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really fun. I enjoyed it. They asked me probably like 3 weeks before the game, said, "Hey, we're doing it on." It was broadcast syndicated throughout Alabama, so I mean that was pretty awesome for me, and I had a great time with JD Byers. He's the play-by-play for South Alabama Sports, and Randy Kennedy. He's the afternoon host for 99.5 and is an editor at AL.com. So it was a pretty good deal for me for sure.
Laying the foundation, man. I'm happy to see you do that, bro.
Yeah, it's been a big year for me personally. I mean, I've talked more about the draft this year than I think I ever have, and it feels nice to actually, finally, after putting in all the hard work over the years, to finally start seeing it pay off. And but yeah, I see I got my Louisiana shirt on for my native Louisianan here. I got on the show with me. Well, Emory, I brought you on tonight. We're going to talk a couple teams quickly. I won't keep you on here long. We're going to talk about the Falcons, and I know you're in tune with the Giants. I know you do camp stuff up there during the preseason, so we'll talk about them too. We'll start with Atlanta. And how special can Kyle Pitts be in that offense or in general in the NFL?
I think he could be a really good player right off the bat. I think the comp for him was Darren Waller. As a wide receiver, it'll be Plexico Burress, or as a tight end, like I said, is Randy McMichael. So I think he's just going to be a really good player, man. And I do feel like we get caught up in the hyperbole, expecting this guy to be something that we hadn't seen before. But I'm pretty sure we said the same thing about Jeremy Shockey, about Kellen Winslow Jr., about Vernon Davis, about all these other tight ends that we've seen come down the pike, Antonio Gates, Jimmy Graham. So it's not like we haven't seen dynamic talents at tight end before. Darren Waller being more recent. It's just that this guy seems like he's ready to hit the ground running right away as a rookie. So what you see is what you're going to get, which is very good.
Atlanta drafted a couple of defensive backs. Richie Grant from UCF, safety, showed out down here at Mobile, and so did Darren Hall, corner from San Diego State. Tell me a little bit about those two guys.
Yeah, Richie Grant was my number one strong safety. I compared his style of play in game to Brian Dawkins. He's a guy that, he's listed as a strong safety, but he can cover. He plays the ball extremely well. He's terrific in run support, plays the alley very well. It's going to really help out that secondary. And Darren Hall, I've said this all throughout the week, you can't go wrong with a San Diego State defensive back because it seems like those dudes come into the league ready to play. They're versatile. Hall can play any one of the safety spots, any one of the corner spots. I had him as my number 2 combo safety. So I'm a big fan of his. And we can't forget about Avery Williamson, who, he may be a special teams ace, but he's also a really good corner that can also play safety in the pinch. So they got 3 legit studs, in my opinion, in the secondary.
I'll tell you what I like about Darren Hall is there's very rare you see a corner lead the team in solo tackle market share, and that's what Darren Hall did at San Diego State. And he was very impressive, like I said, at the Senior Bowl, and I was glad to see him go to Atlanta there. Their third round pick, Jalen Mayfield, I was lower on him than most, I'll say. What am I missing with Mayfield?
Well, I like him more so in the run game. I think because in the run game, you force yourself to be aggressive. And I think that's where he has to take it to his pass in pass pro. I think he tends to be a little bit too patient in pass pro, which gets him into trouble. If he could bring that same assertiveness and aggressiveness that he has in a run game with him in pass protection, he'll be all right.
You mentioned Avery Williams earlier, and you liked him. Out of Drew Dahlman, Taquan Graham, Ade Ogundiji, and Frank Darby, who else can be an early impact for Atlanta?
Well, I would probably say Frank Darby. I know it's crowded in that receiving core, but Frank Darby was my number one inside wide receiver. So I look at him as like a big slot almost. He has tremendous hands, man, and he is going to always be open because he can catch. So if you have great hands like that, you're never covered because you're going to find a way to get yourself in position to make a play. He also runs really good routes. And I was surprised that he was 6'1", 200. I thought he was like 6'5", 230 with how big he plays. And so that's just a great thing for Atlanta. I thought they got better on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I liked Frank Darby. He had a good week at the Senior Bowl, too. I thought, well, maybe not as good as some of the other receivers, but I thought he played well down here. Last question on Atlanta. We'll move on to the Giants. Do you think they're going to regret passing on Justin Fields and or Mac Jones to a lesser extent to stay with Matt Ryan?
Maybe, but if you're going to get Matt Ryan 2 years out of Matt Ryan, then I think that's fine. There's always some quarterback that pops up in the draft that you can go ahead on and grab, but I don't see Matt Ryan as a dire liability like, let's say, any other one of these quarterback positions, that you see that, man, they need a quarterback. Falcons, although it would have been a good idea to take somebody that you could stash for a year or two, and get him ingratiated in the system before he takes over when Matt Ryan leaves or retires. So I understand that sentiment, but if Matt Ryan is still playing adequately at the position and you don't see that much of a drop off, then you could still get a little bit more out of him. So I can see both sides of the argument to answer your question.
Yeah, I get that. And it's like the contract was uncuttable, untradeable for at least this year anyway. So I truly get why they didn't. Let's move on to the Giants. Like I said, you're very familiar with this team. Obviously, they wanted Devontae Smith. I think that was pretty obvious how for them to bail out on the 11th pick as soon as Philadelphia moved up. So, do you feel like maybe they settled for Kadarius Toney, or was he close enough on their board maybe to Devontae Smith?
He was probably close enough on their board that they felt comfortable in trading out of that pick, which is interesting because you talk about Atlanta passing on Justin Fields. I mean, if you're the Giants, do you really feel you have great faith in Daniel Jones? So I guess that question will be answered this year. But I also believe that Toney was probably high enough on their board to where they were able to move out of that pick. But to pick up an additional first in 2022, what looks to be, by all intents and purposes, a very stacked draft because of, now you include all the small colleges that are playing in the fall and all the guys that opted out that came back and all the people that came back or took advantage of that extra year. So you're going to have a really crowded, deep class of 2022 prospects. So to have 2 first-round picks is really good. So I thought they won on the strength of that alone, let alone they got a good pick in Toney, who I think is an Antonio Brown-like player, what he brings to the table at the position.
I was going to ask this later, but I feel like it's relevant now to what we just said. What got into Dave Gettleman? Was he just tired of being made fun of? The guy never trades down ever and does it twice in 2 rounds.
Yeah, right. And again, he made good, savvy moves because the rest of the draft looked very strong for them. And again, to come away with another first-round pick in next year's class is always an impressive haul, especially if you consider that Toney, let's say Toney was their number 2 wide receiver or number 4 wide receiver, and they still were able to get him by also acquiring an additional first-round pick. So savvy, shrewd move by Dave Gettleman.
They drafted a couple pass rushers, and I know you're a big FCS guy. Am I crazy to think Elliott Smith could be potentially better than Azeez Ojulari?
You're not crazy because I see Azeez Ojulari as more of a sandbacker. Yeah, he could power rush, and he's strong against the run, so he's a good player. I believe it was like my number 3 outside linebacker. So I like him in that regard. As people were talking about him as some sort of, you know, prominent edge rusher. I didn't see that within his game, but Elliott Smith, you see length, you see athleticism, and you saw production at Northern Iowa, and you saw him go down and play really well at Senior Bowl. Watching the practice tape and watching what he was able to do, he bulked up a little bit. He added some strength to his game, and the dude is going to be a nice addition for the Giants. One of the sleeper picks they got in the draft.
I remember watching Dylan Radins, who was also a second-round pick in this draft, and the only player I ever saw give him any trouble was Elliott Smith.
You watched the Iowa State game back in 2019 in that opener, where they took Iowa State down to the wire. They should have won that game, to be honest. He did a really good job.
I watched that game. He had the scoop and score in that game.
Yeah, he played well in that game. And Iowa State has good offensive line play. They have about 300 tight ends on the roster. So he did a really good job in that game. So I like Elliott Smith. That's a very underrated pick for the Giants that could pay dividends this year.
They also snagged Aaron Robinson from UCF. I thought he was the best nickel corner in this draft.
Yeah, I had a really good high grade on that. I think he was my number 6 slot corner. And it's fascinating how he's able to press in the slot, when you really can't get your hands on people because they're off the line of scrimmage. But he does a great job with his feet and being able to mirror and match those guys. So he's pressing with his footwork and keeping those guys at bay. So I like, that selection. And he's going into a luxury position to where he doesn't have to get thrown, onto the field early, because he drafted Darnay Holmes last year. And they're really deep in the secondary. They could play Julian Love in the slot if they want to. They could play Xavier McKinney in a slot if they want to. So right now, Robinson is probably a day one core special teamer that they can throw in there in sub packages and match up with him and really groom him to be a starter, let's say next year, if changes are made in the secondary. But right now, it's a really strong, deep group of players on the back end.
Yeah, the Giants' defense could be pretty strong this year. Like I said, it really, like you said earlier, it comes down to Daniel Jones. He's got everything he needs now. No excuses, right?
No excuses. This is a defense that's, playoff ready. Offensively, the O-line should be even better. Now that those rookies that they drafted last year have another year underneath their belt, another year in the scheme with Jason Garrett. You get Saquon back. You got weapons on the outside. If Daniel Jones cannot, if he could just protect the football and not turn it over, they should win at least 9 games. Just off run game and defense alone. Now, if he takes a humongous step forward, now you're talking 11 games, and that's something that'll be huge. That could go a long way in helping him, get that contract extension or at least get the 5th-year option. Otherwise you'll see him, be on the lookout for another position or for another job as they'll start looking at that position in next year's draft.
I mean, it's that division. It's not like it's not up for grabs or anything. I mean, Washington won it with a losing record last year. So it's anybody's division going in. And one more question, then I'll let you get out of here, Emory. I don't really want to talk about the 2022 draft yet, but I'm probably not going to get many more opportunities to ask you about the FCS group going into next year. And I know, like I said, you're always my go-to guy. I have a question. South Carolina picked up 2 transfers from St. Francis. You're the first person I reached out to. Like, what do I need to know? Who are some of the 2022, maybe the top guys to kind of watch out for for the 2022 draft cycle?
I mean, to be honest, I have no clue, man, because I've been watching those guys play football in the spring. So, I'll just throw out a couple names, and it's usually tied to what I just last saw. Quill Glass, a quarterback from Alabama A&M, has played really well. And I think as he continues to work on his strength and get his body right, he could be a premier player in next year's class at that position, and could be next year's version of Trey Lance. And then you look at Zion McCollum, the cornerback from Sam Houston State, long, athletic corner with ball skills that has done a really good job in the playoffs. That Sam Houston State defense has done a really good job. You think about what he did against Christian Watson, who is another player that's going to be, a draft pick. He's a tall, speedy wide receiver from Florida, plays at North Dakota State, and that's one guy that definitely is going to hear his name called. And McCollum really had him under wraps throughout the game. So I just think those three guys, just initially off what I just watched, would be some of the FCS guys. But I know based on what we saw in the spring, and a lot of guys that I had a grade on going into the 2020 season before everybody opted out, it's going to be a really good year for the small college ranks, especially, I throw out another guy that I'm thinking about it at University of Charleston, Tyreek McAllister, running back. He was a receiver, then they moved him to running back, and this dude has posted, games where he ran for over 400 yards, games where he ran for over 300 yards, games where he ran for over 200 yards. Like, he is outstanding, and I think he's going to be one of these, another pro prospect and possible drafted type player coming from University of Charleston. You think about going back to the last 4 years with the kid that went down to Tampa, I believe, and then you had Kaminsky at with the Falcons. This year you got Strong getting drafted.
And they had Kenny Randall. He didn't get drafted, but I'm pretty sure he got signed.
He's going to get signed somewhere, and now Tyreek McAllister and whatever they're doing down there, I'm gonna have to make a way out there because that's way too many pro prospects coming from a small school in West Virginia, and so they're doing something right out there because they're pumping them out, and Tyreek McAllister is the next in line.
I like that you mentioned Zion McCallum. I know I asked you if he was going to enter this draft. Evidently, he did not. But yeah, him and Christian Watson both were two that I watched off of 2019 tape that I was anticipating would be in this draft class and ended up not being. But yeah, those two were definitely ones that I had my eye on. I know when you work with CBS, do you do a lot? Do y'all do the halftime for the Mountain West games on Sports Network too, or no?
Yeah, we do. We do I think they kind of use it for whichever game is up at halftime. So yeah, we've done. I remember we did something for. It was such a fun season that it was 1 week where there wasn't an SEC game of the week, so they threw that Mountain West game at that 3:30 slot, the Nevada San Diego State game, which was outstanding. So we did something for that, both pre and post, pre halftime and post. So it all depends, and I'll be interested to see what they do this year. What we do this year, I think it's next year. CBS loses SEC. I think it's 2022. So I don't know what they'll do in replace of that. So it'll be interesting to see. But I know this year it'll be the same thing, doing halftime, pregame, and postgame stuff. So it's gonna be fun.
I know. I'm glad you said that Nevada game because that's kind of where I was fishing for. Carson Strong, quarterback from Nevada, Cole Turner, tight end from Nevada, and
Romeo
Dobbs Dubs. Those three guys right
and
there.
Power, man. I like the way this dude runs, man. The running back.
Those guys are awesome. That is I didn't mean to watch them like 5 times last year, but I ended up doing it anyway. And those guys are fun to watch on offense. I can't wait to watch them more this season. So I think all three, or maybe even all 4. I mean, I think they have some linemen too, right? That are prospects. So I mean that team's going to be appointment viewing there. And Carson Strong, sneaky first round prospect at quarterback.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch Nevada, man. I thought they had a really good chance to run the table and go undefeated, but San Jose State had other plans and really nipped that in the bud. So, but they return a lot. And we talked about their offense. Their defense was very active. They were able to pressure the ball and pressure the quarterback. So I'm excited about next year because, we should be in a much better place with the pandemic and, guys going to be back out there playing ball. And you get, again, with the small colleges playing in the fall, along with the FBS guys, next year's class is going to be fun to break down. That, my draft guide may have 1,000 pages in it as opposed to 600 something. So I can't wait.
You joke about that, but I mean, with all the guys that went back and everybody basically got the free year of eligibility. I mean, I want to say I read something on Twitter earlier where there was a guy saying, listen, if they tell you you're a 5th round pick next year, you're undrafted. And if you're undrafted, they're telling you you're undrafted, that means you're a camp tryout. I mean, there's going to be so many players in next year's class that it's going to be borderline like crazy.
Well, let's hope the XFL comes back in time to scoop up a lot of these players.
Yeah, I agree. Emory, I can't thank you enough for coming on with me and talking draft tonight. Tell everybody where they can find all of your work.
They can follow me on Twitter at FBallGamePlan. Subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/footballgameplan. That's where you're going to see our draft grades come out. We don't put our draft grades out until probably a week or two after the draft because we want to make sure we get all the undrafted free agent signings and tryout guys that actually make the roster because that's a part of the draft. That teams use that as strategy. So we include the undrafted guys in our draft grade. So that's why we are probably the last ones to come out with grades. But also you could check out our draft guide. It's good to have because not only will you get scouting notes on players that were drafted, we know the rosters are transient during the preseason training camp and throughout the season. So your team signs someone that you may not know who it is. Best believe we have a scouting report on them. And that's at footballgameplan.com/2021 draft guide.
Best $10 you can spend right there, Emory. Thanks for coming on, man.
I appreciate you, Brian. Good luck and continue to do great things, man.
I appreciate that. That was Emory Hunt of footballgameplan.com. You can go check out his YouTube channel, Football Game Plan, and follow him on Twitter, FBallGamePlan. Emory Hunt, good friend, sat beside Emory at the Senior Bowl like 4 years in a row in the press box. I mean, he's just a great guy to talk with, and he really knows his stuff. And especially if you don't follow the small school guys, Emory's your man for that for sure. He's all over those guys. He gets out and does play-by-play for those games in the fall. So Emory's definitely a great resource for the for all football, not just small. But that's going to do it for tonight's show. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Deep Fried Draft. Like and subscribe to the channel here. Get notifications for whenever we go live. I think we've got shows lined up all week long here. Every night this week we're going to have talking about a different team with a different guest. So you want to subscribe to that channel, and get the notifications here on YouTube. And so anyway, that's going to do it. Everybody, have a good night. See you next time.